Now it is time for the panel discussion with Swami Sarvasthananda and Dr. Jeffrey Long. I think everybody knows Jeff by now. He's been here many times very recently. He's a professor at Elizabethtown College in South Asian Studies and Philosophy. Yeah, okay, and a very dear friend of ours. So they'll have a short presentation, the two of them, then there'll be question and answer like yesterday. So we have paper, Prakat is there, paper and pen, so everyone please write down your questions, and when they're finished with their presentations, they'll answer the questions.
Oh, you want me to begin?
Yeah, we'll begin.
I'm happy to defer to
No,
you. Sure? Okay. Okay. So I will be fairly brief. Good morning, namaskar, everyone. And I'm going to begin on a very materialistic note because Shibu has asked me to announce that some books that I've written are available in the bookstore. And I just also want you to know that this was a gift to the Vedanta Center. The money's all going to the Vedanta Center. It's idam namama, as we say in the Havan, right? So, but if you're interested in them at all, they're out there. So yes, now I'll talk about what I'm supposed to talk about. And because our theme this weekend is spiritual practice, and so I want to say some things about persistence, the importance of persisting with our practice, and a little bit about distractions and how to deal with them, because that's the big problem that I think many people, the big challenge people face. So first, in regard to persistence, I will tell you a brief story about my late Uncle John. And Mom was cringing now because she knew Uncle John and what's going to happen. But Uncle John was curious about meditation, so I just gave him some very basic instructions, some breathing exercises, some ways that he could calm his mind. And few months passed, and he didn't speak about it, and I didn't bring it up again. And then one day, out of the blue, he said, "Oh, I tried that meditation that you taught me. It didn't work." And I said, "Well, how long did you meditate?" And he said, 10 minutes. And I said, well, okay, 10 minutes, but for how many days or how many weeks did you do the practice? He said, no, 10 minutes. Like, one time, 10 minutes, that was it. And so he did not persist with it, and I don't think he got much out of it, but by his own account. This is, I think, one problem we often find with meditation is people who are new to it come to it, and even sometimes people who've been doing it a long time, come to it with the wrong expectation. And sometimes people think there is immediately going to be some kind of psychedelic experience, right? They're going to see visions and their life is going to change instantaneously. It's far more like training for the Olympics or just trying to lose weight or, one of those things where it takes persistence. And also the length of time in which one meditates. Now this varies, and people who have been meditating for many years and who are very advanced in the practice sometimes will meditate for very long periods of time. And I think there's an assumption among many people that that is a requirement. So I'll tell you about another conversation I had with a student at our college. He wasn't one of my students, but I met him at a social event. And he was very curious about meditation, and we talked about it a little bit. And he made a statement that I found very curious. He said, I've always been drawn to meditation, but I don't feel like I have time for it. And I'm a pretty busy person myself, and I'm in our tradition. I'm initiated. I meditate twice a day. So I said to him, why do you feel like you don't have time? He said, well, I think instead of meditating, I should be studying. And this did strike me as odd. So I said to him, "Do you bathe?" And he looked kind of offended. Of course, I said. And how often do you bathe? And well, every day, you know. And about how long does it take you? 15, 20 minutes, he said. Well, I said, that's just like meditation. I said, when you're bathing, are you ever thinking, I should be studying right now? Maybe I better not take a bath today. I better spend these 20 minutes. I said, no, it's part of his daily routine, part of his life habit. And in order to really get the results that we ultimately want from meditation, it needs to be a habit. We need to build it into our lives. And I think the analogy with exercise and diet and so on is a good one, because sometimes people come up with very unrealistic expectations about exercise, and unrealistic expectations that they place upon themselves. And of course, everyone's very fond of New Year's resolutions. And they say, okay, I'm going to get up every day at 5 a.m. and I'm going to run on the treadmill for 60 minutes. And that lasts till about January 3rd. And then they've given up the whole thing after that. And they don't make any progress. We make progress when we have modest expectations, and when we commit ourselves to a habit that we can easily incorporate into our lifestyle. And I think this is one of the things for which we can be grateful to Swami Vivekananda for bringing this practice to the Western world and for presenting it in a way that makes it possible for busy people, right, modern Americans, to actually benefit from this practice. You don't have to go to the Himalayas and dedicate hours and hours of every day to it. Do that if you feel so inclined, but if you have other commitments as well that are also very important to you, then it's possible to integrate it into your life. So this is one thing I would want to emphasize about spiritual practice is we have to persist with it, and we have to craft our schedule in such a way that we can realistically persist with it. Otherwise, we give up too easily. We really give up very easily. We're like the student who, wanted to take a shower but not meditate, or my uncle who meditated for 10 minutes and decided that was enough for him. If we really want to benefit from this, we have to, in a sense, make it easy for ourselves. Now, on the other hand, and you're going to hear me say this several times in my brief remarks today, there's a reason the Buddha talked about the middle path. We don't want to be too easy on ourselves. We don't want to make the practice so easy that it's unnoticeable in terms of its ability to benefit us. I also had students, I lead a meditation group once a month in our library at our college. And some of the students were very fond of the shavasana, the corpse pose, right? And so when we would meditate, I had a couple students that said, can we meditate lying down? Because I was explaining how to sit with your back straight and so on. And I said, sure, that's a perfectly valid, I said, show me how you're doing it. They showed me, they were doing it correctly. One of the students fell asleep and snored loudly through the entire meditation session. So that became, there are very few rules in my meditation sessions, but one of them is no shavasana, not allowed. You could do that at home, not here. We don't want to be distracted by your snoring. So, and it made me realize sometimes people will do something like, okay, I'm going to meditate lying down, and then they basically go to sleep, right? Now, if you want to use it as a sleep aid, fine, it does work for that purpose. But this is not what we're talking about when we're talking about spiritual life. We're talking about something that is designed to transform our consciousness, and I heard Swami Swahananda saying something very beautiful about this yesterday evening. We have not just a lifetime, but lifetimes of sanskaras, habits that we have accumulated, and we don't even know what they are, right? There's so much in our mind that we're not even aware of, and we're trying to gain access to that, and we're trying to purify that. And so it does have to be a serious effort. So we need to be persistent with it, but we need to start in a way that is not so demanding that we give it up, right? So the middle path is very important. The middle path is also very important when it comes to distractions. Because once we've settled on how often we're going to meditate and how long we're going to meditate, and we've got that going, right? So now we're talking about now a person who has a habit of meditating. Distractions. Distractions become an issue even for people who have meditated for many, many, many years. In fact, I was very struck one day. I was reading something in the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna. I forget where it is, but he's talking about meditation. And he himself, Thakur himself, who had so many profound experiences, says that sometimes when he will do sadhana, he will encounter the Divine Mother, he will see various things. And then he said, in other times, it's just me. And that's how it's translated by Swami Nikhilananda. And my sense is that he was saying there's not always fireworks. There's not always some kind of great experience that happens. And very often we find that our minds are full of mostly what we need to do during the day or what we have done during the day. Confess a little something about how Mahu and I, when we do our meditation, she has a better meditation, she tells me, in the morning. She gets up and her mind is fresh and she meditates very, very deeply. And in the evening, she finds it a little more difficult because her mind is full of what happened during the day. And I had that conversation with that person. Did I say the right thing? And how did that go? I'm the opposite. I get up in the morning and I'm thinking about everything I have to do during the day. And I'm sort of playing it out in my mind. Okay, this is the topic I'm going to talk about in this class. And okay, I have a panel discussion with the very distinguished Swami today, and a lot of people will be there, and I want it to sound good. And then in the evening, the day is over, and it's like, okay, I'm done with that. I don't have to think about anything now except going to bed, and I meditate very deeply. And so we're opposite that way. But in both cases, we have distractions, and most of them are about conversations that we have had or are going to have, things from our past, things from our present. So many distractions. We suddenly remember something important that we need to do. And I learned through my own practice, and then recently I read something by Aldous Huxley which really confirmed this for me. We need to, again, follow the middle path. We need to be firm but gentle with ourselves when we have distractions. The instinct is to force away the distraction. You try to just concentrate very, very hard and make it go away. And when I was first teaching students how to meditate, that's what their approach was. And one poor young woman actually gave herself a headache while meditating. Like, that's the opposite of the effect you want to have while meditating. Right? Some of the students said it's actually stressful to meditate because they're trying so hard to push away the thoughts. I said, no, don't push them so hard. Find another way. And then I realized I myself was struggling with this, and I found another way eventually to deal with distractions. And it was very comforting to me to find Huxley talking in very similar language. And he gave a really wonderful rationale for it. So imagine you've come to the temple, and you're here to have darshan of this beautiful vigraha of Thakur. And then a very tall person sits right in front of you and is right in your way. And you can't see Thakur anymore. You just see the back of this person's head. What do you do? Well, you're not going to knock him out of the way, right? That would not be appropriate behavior for the temple. No, you're just going to shift a little bit. Look around that person, Ah, yes, now I can see. Now I can see. And Huxley said, it's a nice image. He said, you're trying to focus on the divinity within. You're trying to focus on the Ishta. And then this clown appears in your way, and it's your own mind with its distracting thoughts. Ah, you have to do the dishes still, something like that. And you don't force it away. You look over its shoulder, so to speak, because you know the divinity is back there. And so we sort of just look around the distraction. And there's a couple of very profound insights that come out of this advice. One is, if we pursue a line of thought, we give it energy. And it starts to become more and more dominant in our thinking. It's like it starts to become a sanskara, right? So the thing to do is just not think about that. Direct your mind elsewhere. Thinking about something gives that thing energy, and it makes it more dominant in your mind. So ironically, the harder you try to push away the distracting thought, the more distracting it becomes. You're giving it gas, you're giving it fuel, you're giving it energy, because you're thinking about it by trying very hard not to think about it. It's paradoxical, but it's the way it is. So if you just say, okay, thought, you're there, but I'm looking at this much more profound thing over your shoulder behind you. And after a while, it realizes that it's not getting the attention that it wants, and it dries up and goes away. That's one strategy. Another strategy which Aldous Huxley mentions, and it's also taught in our Vedanta tradition and also in Buddhist traditions, is that after you've developed a certain capacity for meditation, you can observe the distraction without getting caught up in it. That is, you realize that there is you and there is the thought that is distracting you. And you can just observe the thought in a detached way without engaging with it. And in fact, one of the things you can do when you develop that capacity to sort of observe the thought as an object distinct from yourself, you can trace its origins. Okay, what made me think of that? And you might actually get insight from that distraction. And you might realize, okay, I'm distracted by this because I'm neglecting this other part of my life, and I need to attend to that because it's making me think about this thing while I'm meditating. And if I take care of that, that will go away. Right? And so by observing the thoughts and tracing them to their origins, and very often when we do that too, they also dissolve, because we realize very often they're based on fears or reactions that are just no longer appropriate to our life. So we say, okay, that's what that's about, and it just goes away. So trace it to its origins without getting caught up in it. That's the trick. You have to observe it as an object separate from yourself. And you can also do various kinds of visualization that help with this. I've sometimes told students to visualize the distracting thoughts as clouds, and there's a gentle breeze, and it's just blowing them away. And you're down here on the ground, and the thoughts are up there, and pretty soon they're gone. And so these are ways to deal with distractions. Now, the last thing I want to talk about is a very powerful type of distraction. And it's a dangerous distraction partly because it comes in the guise of something very good. And this is what the ancient sages and texts call siddhis. Sometimes if we really become good at calming the mind and getting in touch with those deeper levels of our existence, we find abilities there that may change our lives in various ways. You find you can sense certain things. You become very sensitized to certain things. And there are long lists of these siddhis that the Yoga Sutra, Patanjali talks about these as well. And some of them sound quite incredible. They are distractions, though. They are side effects of following the spiritual path and doing a spiritual practice. But they're also temptations, because we might start to delude ourselves into thinking that the purpose of meditation is to attain these. And the literatures of many traditions are full of stories of people who developed these abilities and came to a bad end because of them. They got some very bad karma for themselves because they tried to use these powers. And in fact, the Buddha specifically forbade his followers from utilizing siddhis. He said, these appear, let them go, continue meditating. And Huxley says this as well. The purpose of meditation is to arrive at that contact with the divinity within us. Anything else that comes up along the way, even if it's very pleasant, is finally a distraction. If you think of the mind as a glass that is between us and the divine, and that glass is very dirty, so we're trying to clean it, we're trying to purify it, and we do that through meditation. But we also do it through things like our ethical practices, our moral practices. This is another important practical element of spiritual practice. If you do spiritual practice and in your life you're not also working on how you behave as a person, I think there's a good reason that the yamas and niyamas come first in the Patanjali yoga system. We need to develop good habits of how we treat others, how we treat the environment, other living beings, the people we care about, and even ourselves. And then our meditation will be more effective. Some of these distractions that come are sometimes an effect of not having worked enough on those sort of moral aspects of our life. And there's a wonderful story. It's probably apocryphal, but the point is nevertheless very well made, about these siddhis, what distractions they can be. There's a story of the Buddha that he was walking along a riverbank, and he came to a yogi who had been sitting on that riverbank for a very, very long time. And the Buddha did his pranam, he paid his respects to the yogi, and he inquired, he said, how is your spiritual practice going? How is this working for you? And the yogi said, it's going very well. He said, I sat on this spot for 25 years, and I've now developed the ability to walk across this river without sinking in, right? Just walking across the water, just like the miracle we hear of Jesus walking on the water, right? And the Buddha said, well, that's a great achievement, but there's a bridge nearby. You could have just walked. It wasn't necessary to sit for 25 years and develop this power, right? So if we meditate with an eye on how it can help us develop some psychic powers or something of that sort, it's not that they won't come, but that's not the point. And really, in fact, you're exchanging something very cheap for something very, very precious. You're really there to realize the self. And so everything else really doesn't matter. So we have to persist and work with our distractions. Thank you. We'll do the questions at the end, or
Do both presentations first.
Questions first.
Yeah. No, you continue and
Okay.
I know there's more time to write.
Okay, yeah. So I'll continue from where I left, because there were certain things which I had not discussed, and while we were taking tea, some of you asked these questions, so I'll try to address them. So first is, most of the upasakas or aspirants who are initiated in the Ramakrishna order, before that I'll tell you that whatever I discuss here is taken from some of the most authentic books of our order. You'll find them all published. So there is nothing confidential about all these things. They are in different books. As I said, I gave you a list of authentic books for the upasana as it is practiced in our Ramakrishna order. So the first are the source books, Great Master, Gospel, and then they are practically the source books, the Life of Holy Mother, and also for Swamiji's 4 yogas. And in these 4 yogas, especially in Raj Yoga, Swami Vivekananda mentions the need. Somebody was asking the place of academic learning or reading, Swadhyaya as it's popularly known. What is the role? How many books should we read? What should we read? What should we not read? So Swami Vivekananda gives us a beautiful answer in his Raj Yoga. He says, time is limited, our life is short, and there are innumerable books with innumerable ideas. Shastras are infinite in number. He is quoting from one of our Sanskrit sayings, proverbs. And he says, since that is the case, Swamiji gives a very good suggestion that read only books which are written by people who have had realization. That is authentic, which belong to an authentic tradition, and spiritual personalities who have realized these truths in their own lives. That is a very safe guide for us. So then it narrows down our choices. We don't have to read so much. Of course, to keep ourselves engaged, to do some kind of lila dhyana or meditation on the different aspects. For example, many of Chaitananji's books, they have that nature. I mentioned it to him. They serve a different purpose. All the compilations, the wonderful incidents of the life of an incarnation, and all the great saints, when you read them, you read it with a different purpose, not to question them. Just allow those incidents to sink into your consciousness, and in a way they purify our mind, the depths of our unconscious, which is full of samskaras. But a more effective way, as I said, is the repetition of nama, japa. So one hint he gives in Raj Yoga, there's another hint. He tells a story. How the subtle, one of the questions was, why do we not recite the mantra, why in our tradition you are asked to repeat the mantra in your mind. Once the Guru utters and you utter, after that you never speak out that mantra. So in the mantra shastra, as I said, there is the outermost expression of the mantra or any sound, any word that we utter is known as Vaikhari. It's a outwardmost gross expression of the word which has more potency before there are several stages. So I'll try to discuss that briefly, as Swami Vivekananda and other Swami Turiyananji, and also, as I said, there are other authentic books. Swami Brahmananji's Dharma Prasange Swami Brahmananda, or the Eternal Companion, and there is for seekers of God, because these are the questions that used to be asked. People who were sincere about their upasana and spiritual practices, especially those who lived with Mahapurush Maharaj, with Brahmananji, these questions were asked and they were compiled. So they can be considered as absolutely authentic sources. There are, of course, other books. In Raj Yoga, Swami Vivekananda explains why the subtle repetition, or anything that is more subtle than gross, has more power. It can control the grosser thing. So he gives a wonderful story which is worth recollecting here. The story is that a king imprisons a minister. And it's a very famous story. It's there in Raj Yoga. He imprisons the minister for some reason. And he imprisons him on the top of a tower which has no access. There's a window, but obviously cannot jump. And he is doomed there. He has to die there. So then his wife comes and they are thinking of ways how he can come down. So he asks her to gather a few things. He was very wise, the minister. So he tells you, bring a small beetle, a little honey, a silk thread, a simple thread, and a big rope. You bring all these things. And then he asks her to take the beetle, tie that very slender silk thread on the insect, tie it to the insect, and then allow it to climb the wall and put a small bit of honey on its horns, the two horns that the beetle has. And then it will tempt him, thinking that the honey is near. It will force the beetle to go upwards, crawl along the wall of the tower. It's a very long tower, and it finally reached there. Since the very thin silk thread was tied, it goes up to the top, and as soon as it reaches the window, the minister catches hold of that silk thread and then asks his wife, who is below, to tie the thread, slightly a stronger thread. And then finally, when he pulls the stronger thread, he ties the rope, which is strong enough for him to climb down. And that is how he escapes. The moral of this story, of course, in Raj Yoga, Swamiji used it in a different context. So you can, the moral of this is, the more subtle a thing is. For example, gross repetition is very convenient. It's more easy because we always live on the gross plane. So it's easier for us to repeat certain things, certain words. But it's difficult if you ask a person to repeat it mentally. So that is the subtle intermediate stage. In Mantra Shastra, Vaikhari is the outward expression of the mantra. There is a stage known as Madhyama, where the subtle intermediate state, where it just precedes audible speech. Just before audible speech, and the Mantra Shastris say, there the form of your Ishta and the name, as I said, mentioned yesterday, Nam and Namni Abhed, means the name and the named are not different. So repeating the name is as good as visualizing the form. This is a very big issue. Most of us cannot repeat the mantra. We would rather, when we repeat the mantra, mentally of course, when we do it, which is the Madhyama state, very often the form does not automatically come. They are discrete at this stage. So we start with that. We don't start with loud repetition of the mantra. At the Madhyama state, they are separate, and it takes some effort for us. That is why we are instructed to repeat the name and try to bring the form. It does not come automatically. But as you persist, you have to persist. You have to do it regularly. If you persist, what happens is, in the third stage, that is after Madhyama, there is a stage where you go a bit deeper. It is known as Pashyanti, where something strange happens. It is not something which we can induce. We can induce it, of course, through practice, but it is spontaneous. It happens. What happens is the form, in the previous stage, that is Madhyama stage, we were repeating it mentally, not loudly. But the form, we had to struggle to bring the form and the name together. Whereas if you persist, then the name and form merge. That is what happens in the Pashyanti state. Deeper and deeper we go, the more subtle, as this rope, you start with the subtle, you go, then you can get hold of the gross, whatever you want to achieve, whatever transformation you need, how to bring that meditative awareness in our day-to-day actions, how to convert it, transmute it into all the different yogas. So meditation helps you to do it because you catch the subtle, you go deeper and deeper, and the more subtle you go, the more easily you can grasp. So at this third stage, which is known as Pashyanti, the power of the Ishta Devata, where Shabda means name, and Artha, the meaning or the form, merges. So we have to wait patiently till it becomes so spontaneous and natural that every time you repeat, you don't have to think of the form. It automatically appears. But that appears at the third stage, Pashyanti. Then you have to go further. Somebody was asking, and you also mentioned about that the samskaras are not just of this life. Karma vasanas, which I said, one of the purposes of Diksha or the repetition of the mantra is use the power of the sound, especially the bija sound and the entire mantra, to remove all the hidden impressions of not only this life but several lives. That is very important. We just judge ourselves by what we have done in this life, not realizing that we are carrying the baggage of samskaras of our previous lives. So one cannot judge oneself or judge others, how long it will take. One has to be persistent in his practice. So when you come to the third stage, that is the Pashyanti stage, there is a chance that shows some kind of spiritual development when the mental repetition of the name brings the form into your field of vision. You see the form, or you see whatever you see. It may not be the swarupa of the Ishta, but you get some idea of the form which is always unified with this Shabda or the name. Then para is the state. Para is the highest repetition, that is the highest level of repetition, sound reproduction, which starts with Vaikhari. The mantra shastras say that when you pass the third stage, it's so difficult even to come to the third stage. You reach the fourth stage where the mantra really starts acting. We call it awakened mantra. The mantra is awakened. So Holy Mother says Japat Siddhi. When she says, she refers to this persistence. You have to go on repeating. You get all the stages you pass through just by repetition. The form will come, everything will come, because the inherent power in the mantra enables you, when you reach the para state, that it goes and controls the samskaras. As Swamiji said, what we see of human personality, the conscious, is just the tip of the iceberg. A majority of the iceberg is hidden. It is in the unconscious or subconscious mind. So that is the innermost recesses of the subconscious mind is not accessible to our normal sadhana. So that is why these tantras introduce the mantra, bija mantra, idea of bija, which bijas are always of Shakti. It's always a Shakti represented by the bija, which is associated with the Devata. But as I said, Sri Ramakrishna, you can attach any bija to that for the simple reason that he is Sarva Deva Devi Swarupa. It's a very rare phenomena where the bija, any bija works, and these mantras have come down from none other than Sri Ramakrishna, Holy Mother, and the direct disciples themselves. So if somebody has the confusion how bija can be separate, if one bija represents one devata, for Kali there is a bija, Krishna there is a bija. So this whole idea of bija mantra is not only to reveal the identity in a very subtle way, the real swarupa of the Ishta, but also do it in a progressive way. The more we progress, the particular vibration of that bija, when it is tuned to the vibrations, each Ishta Devata, as I said, there's a wonderful article, everybody should read it. Ashokananji has taken the subject of vibration, Revered Swami Ashokanji, right from the gross vibration that we see in the outer world to spiritual vibrations, to the important concept of satsanga, which yesterday we could not discuss. The idea of satsanga is nothing but vibrations. Why satsanga? Why holy company? We can read books. Of course, we can read books. We get holy company indirectly, virtual. We can even have virtual. Nowadays, we have virtual satsanga. That also is possible. But these vibrations, they are not only subtle, but they have a gross element. Just as the sound reproduction has several stages, para to pashyanti, pashyanti to madhyama, and from madhyama you come to the vaikhari, which we hear, which we are familiar with, and it's easy for most of us. Some people even ask us, they have developed the habit of writing the mantras. They said, can we not write? Some people write books and books, just write Sri Ram, Jai Ram, Jai Jai Ram. Some of the temples encourage that. So it's just like verbal repetition, loud repetition. We are just writing it, that's all. So that is why Swami Turiyananji in one of his letters, he says, you can have different experiences depending on the type of sadhana or type your aptitude or your capacity. He says, I have heard, Turiyananji says this, he says, I have heard some people see the mantra that they were repeating suddenly appear in golden letters. These are all mystical things. We have to take their word for it. Because it comes, as Swamiji says, from realized, they are utterances of realized souls. They would never speak anything which they have not experienced. And Sri Ramakrishna is the highest in that category. Every word, the spoken word, the importance of spoken word, you can feel if you are reading the gospel. Whether you read in the original or not, in the English translation, it doesn't matter. But the power of the spoken word, Swami Vivekananda says, why do, in Rajoga, again Swami Vivekananda's words I am quoting, he says, why do some people whose simple words, like Buddha spoke in parables, Sri Ramakrishna spoke in the simplest language, and why they have more power than the academicians who write wonderful works? They don't create an impact. The moment they die, all their books and everything is lost. Though they are very interesting to read. He says the power of prana. He brings in the idea of prana. These people have charged their words. Whatever they uttered, they are like mantras. In fact, if you see, there is an edition of Gospel where Master Masha, he published that some of the sentences that Sri Ramakrishna spoke, there are more than 100, I think, he has typed it, he has printed them in bold letters. He says these are Sri Ramakrishna's Mahavakyas. You see, we have Mahavakyas in the Upanishads, which are cryptic mantras condensing so many ideas. The sutras are like that. So Sri Ramakrishna also, he is also more powerful than all the rishis. His words, they are like these words are packed with power because of it, they are surcharged with the power of thought. The power of it has reached, it comes from a source which is far, far beyond the spoken word. So we have to see these are the stages. That is what the story implies. The silken thread was responsible for the rope to be pulled up, and that he made his escape. So in a way that suggests that we have to approach these things. The more subtler thing, the more powerful it is. That's why in Rajoga Swamiji very clearly says, the prophets and these great avatars, when they speak, their words, they are eternal, they are like scriptures. They are like scriptures because the power of realization, the power of prana that they infuse into this, that gives them power. So similarly, all our japa that we do, every devata that is associated with a particular japa and the particular bija associated with it, which gives it additional power. They have the power to remove our samskaras. Otherwise, if we follow the path of Patanjali, you will see that you have to counter every thought. It's a very slow process. Whereas here, it is like a shortcut. It's like using a very powerful hosepipe to clean things. So this mantra shastra or this tantras developed this idea of cryptic, these bija mantras, which have the potency in them. These are all, you will find all the great books which I mentioned now, they speak about the bija. It's there everywhere. It's published. So that is the importance of this. How, and then the whole mantra ends with some salutation, and that is typical of Vedanta. That you have to connect. Yoga means you have to connect the Jivatma with the Paramatma. You do it through mantra. It is Japa Yoga or Mantra Yoga. You do it through mantra, and the salutation at the end, Namaha or whatever it is, that means that it is the surrender, that you surrender to the Ishta and yourself becomes one. That is the goal of all yoga, to have a union of the individual self, full of ego and all other defects, and allow the power of the mantra and the power of the Ishta ultimately to infuse yourself. That's why we meditate within. We meditate on there is this importance of these lotuses also. They are all mystical things. We cannot ask why not a flame, why just a lotus. So we imagine there is a lotus which is drooping, but as soon as the Ishta appears there, the drooping petals, they rise. So these are all symbolic things, and they are not just symbolic, they are experiences of these great spiritual scientists, if I can use this word. They saw these things, they experienced these things, and their words, their utterances are packed with power. Our job is just to persist, as Sri Ramakrishna said, even if you don't know, doing japa, doing our upasana is like so many links of a chain. Where that chain leads to, what is the object that it is leading us to? We do not know. It is submerged under water. So we just hold one link, go to the next link, go and till it will reach the goal. We must have confidence in this great authentic tradition, which is started by none other than Sri Ramakrishna, the avatar of this age, who has started that, and it has flown, it has come down to us through a series of a Guru Parampara, and that gives its importance. Not the individual Guru that really matters. He is the Guru Maharaj, he is the source of the mantra, he is the goal and he is the way. So that's a beautiful book, The Goal and the Way. So in this case, Sri Ramakrishna is the goal and he is the way. His utterances, how they come down to us. And the easiest and the best way, I'm repeating this, I checked this Bengali translation also. Holy Mother says, it's the easiest and the best way to solve all the problems of life. She's not just speaking of worldly problems. We normally are more concerned about our material problems, worldly problems. She says all the problems, including the spiritual ones. The easiest and the best. If she had said easiest, I would have understood. If you repeat the name, it's a very easy method. Don't try yogas and other things. Raj Yoga and all, they are very difficult. So but she says not just the easiest, but also the best. I checked it with the original Bengali. So she says the easiest and the best way is to, at least for this age, is to repeat the name of the Lord of Sri Ramakrishna in silence. So that is the suggestion she is giving when all worldly solutions do not work. This is Holy Mother's own utterance. And she is telling it to one of her disciples. She says, she is not telling it's just the easiest way because you are not capable of doing other sadhanas, you do this. Just repeat the name. Don't think it's also the best way. So this mantra shastra or the upasana that has come down to us it's a very all-comprehensive upasana based on the different traditions which Sri Ramakrishna himself practiced and infused all his power into that. You see, it makes a difference. He was not an academician gathering all ideas and putting them together like we do and present it before you. We can just quote them. They lived it. So we have to believe in the power of their words, of the spoken word, because the source gives the words the power. And the mantras, as I said, they have come directly. So one should not take them lightly. That is a sadhana which is sufficient. When we studied, and I conclude, when we studied in the training center, we were all excited. We had never encountered so many acharyas with so many scriptures and so many new things. We were just excited, we never studied them in our colleges. We came from different branches of knowledge. So we wanted to learn as much as possible in the 2 years. So we were so keen to gather more and more knowledge, write notes and ask. So our acharyas, some of the acharyas who are very sensitive, they said, see, you listen to everything, but mind you, don't get distracted. We could not understand it then. We were thinking they're just trying to discourage us. But he said, Gyan Gyan Niya, in Bengali they used to say, one Maharaj I still remember, he is no more. He was a beloved acharya, very simple, but a great scholar. Himself has written Shankar Bhashya in Bengali. So he said, Tumra to sudhu Gyan Gyan korcho. Upasna chai. I remember every class he used to say that. So we used to think, we used to just make fun. Okay, we have come here to study these abstruse subjects, this bhashya, that bhashya. But he knew the limitations. As Shankaracharya says, Shabda Jalam Maharanyam. This word, forest of words. See how nicely he puts it. This forest of words is like a big jungle. Don't get lost in that. So that is what they emphasized. They said what your guru has given. And another senior acharya, who again and again, if any question was put to him, and if somebody tried to connect it with their individual spiritual practice, he used to direct us. He said, your guru has given enough instructions. Just follow them. Follow them verbatim. You don't experiment with new things. So this is something which we learned. And this comes only in an authentic tradition where they know the importance, the place of different types of upasana, what role they play in our life, what role the guru plays, what is the central theme, what is the core of the Ramakrishna movement, the upasana as it is taught. So that gives it authenticity, and because it is a time-tested upasana, so many innumerable souls, we hardly know. If you see the Ramakrishna order and see the great monks, many of them have died unknown. The world does not know them because they have not published any books. But if you see some of the spiritual experiences, the lives they lived and quietly lived and died. Swamiji says this. The greatest people are the silent ones who sit in a cave and die. But the others who are more rajasic, they preach these things. So this silent sadhana or upasana, which innumerable monks and devotees, not only monks, there are so many wonderful examples of great householder devotees who have done sadhana, who have had full faith in their guru, in the mantra, in the sadhana and upasana, and they have led exemplary lives, and that was shown not only by their lives but their death, the way they died. That is the test. That's why at the end of sadhana we pray, dedicate everything that we do to Sri Ramakrishna and pray to him that we remember him, because Sri Krishna says, whatever is your last thought will determine your next birth. So it's so difficult. So we pray that at least just before death, last moment, let me remember you, let me not forget you. I may forget you throughout the day, I may not remember you most of the time, but at least at the time of death. And then there's another prayer added. This is Mahapurush Maharaj's prayer, which is there in most of our sadhana, upasana booklets. It says, even if I forget, you see, Sri Ramakrishna is so gracious, you don't forget me. And see that you remember me at that time. And twice this is repeated. I may forget because I'm not used to remembering you all the time. If I had remembered you, there would not be a problem. But if in case I remember, I surrender fully to you, offer whatever I have done to you. That is Japa Samarpanam, which we do at the end. After puja also we do. Whatever good or bad we have done, whatever upasana we have done, whatever sadhana, upasana we do throughout the day, I offer it to you. The only thing I ask is that before I die, I remember you. And if for some reason I don't remember you, you remember me and take me to your ever blissful abode. So that is the gist of the upasana as it is practiced in our Ramakrishna order. Thank you. I think I have taken more time.
We're running a little bit late.
Yeah. So
we have a whole question and answer session.
Yes. So we'll conclude at what time shall we conclude? 12:15 or 12? Then we can.
We can go an extra 20
Yeah, we can.
minutes or something.
No, we can.
But if you want to save any for later.
Okay, what is this? Your setting. Oh my God, can see this. So you want to start?
Should I start?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So we have a very challenging question here. It's more of a statement, really. This person has written, prayer does not work. Scientists asked war veterans to pray for regrowing their lost limbs. It didn't work. Scientists also found prayer does not work to give a bicycle to little Johnny. It does not even move a dry leaf, much less curing diseases. How does it work, and what ways and means are at work? P.S. Some people said the failure of prayer is mainly because they did not face the right direction. Okay. So, hard-hitting questions. There is an answer to this, I believe, and Maharaj will no doubt enlighten us more about it. My understanding, and this is not based on any particular authority, just from my experience, is that prayer functions to help us realize that this ego self with a lowercase s, is not really anything, right? We don't have any great power. We're utterly dependent on the divine self, the self with a capital S. And prayer is that act of saying, I surrender to that. And I loved it yesterday when Swami Atmaganananda talked about the atheist prayer, oh God, if you exist, save my soul if I have one, right? That was the one. It's an impulse. If we think of it as a magic formula that is supposed to work, wherein we ask for something specific and we get it, like the stories of the genie, with the 3 wishes, we've really kind of missed the point of prayer, which, you could see someone in a very difficult situation, like the veteran who's lost a limb. If they pray for their limb to come back, we can probably expect that it won't. But what will happen to the veteran as they go through that process of realizing, I alone can't do anything about this, right? I am utterly dependent upon something else. We are throwing ourselves on the mercy of that infinite reality. The thing we pray for is only the occasion that sparks our felt desire to do that. But what we find is if we make a habit of prayer, that it starts to transform, it's spiritual practice, it starts to transform our awareness, it starts to transform our consciousness. So it may on the surface appear that we're praying for an external result, but what's really happening is that the prayer itself is the purpose. The transformation of consciousness that it facilitates is the purpose. And if we persist at it, we might even forget the thing that we were originally praying for, right? We find that just this act itself of just throwing ourselves at the feet of the divine reality is itself something that is life-giving, something that's transformative. It changes the way we relate to our own experience and to others as well. It's a really tough question because we are constantly presented with very literalistic models of spiritual life. And it shows that we're actually still thinking on a very materialistic plane. But spiritual life is about spirituality, right? It's not about doing some specific concrete thing in the world, pray that I win the lottery, right? Something like that. Or praying for the health of a loved one. Maybe the concrete result doesn't come about. Maybe it does. There are stories in which we see these things happening. But I think in both of those cases, it's really kind of beside the point. The point is by praying, by meditating, we open ourselves up to that infinite reality. And I would even go so far as to say that we encounter many of the sufferings in life that we do so that we will then actually take that step. And then we'll see why we're really here.
Is there time, Maharaj? One. So this is a question that is very commonly asked. Vedas and Hinduism are supposed to be apaurushaya. That means doesn't have an origin, a person as the originator of that particular religion, not from any one person. So why other religious principles should be included in it? Now you see the idea of apaurushaya, I will not go into a long discussion to make things very short. They are essentially revelations in the purified mind. As I said, Sri Ramakrishna discarded learning just to show that in the minds of the rishis who had purified their mind, thoroughly purified their mind, so that intuitive or supersensuous knowledge reveals itself. Supersensuous knowledge is that knowledge which is not a result or an outpouring of normal mind. When you say apaurushaya, it means they are eternal principles. So there are eternal principles in every religion. If we make the mistake of seeing the religion is the one which one particular prophet started, that is not the correct interpretation. But the teachings, if they are eternal, they can belong to any religion, any person. It doesn't depend on geographical location, India or outside India. If the mind is thoroughly purified, if the human mind has been purified to such an extent that these supersensuous or eternal principles are revealed, they are known as scriptures, and they are the real apaurushaya texts. And those texts have the same core principles, same universal principles. They will not change. All we need to do is try to find out what are those eternal principles. Within the limitations of our intellectual capacity, we can do it, but these principles get validity by virtue of their being revealed or realized by these great souls. That way they are apaurushaya. So I think we can conclude. We'll answer there are many questions. So you can.
There are quite a few.
Pranam Maharaj, this is for me.
I like this one.
Okay.
I found one I like. The mystical experiences the enlightened masters have realized, how do we know those are not imagination or hallucination? So one of my favorite verses from the tradition I grew up in, from the New Testament, says, by their fruits you shall know them, right? The fruit of the tree. So let's, as a thought experiment, let's say that these experiences, the great masters, were hallucinations. But what happened in their lives and the lives of the people around them as a result of them having that hallucination? Did they lead a revolutionary movement and kill a whole bunch of people? Well, that was probably a false revelation then. But were their lives transformed such that they became very wise, very compassionate, very humble, such that people felt mysteriously drawn to them, even if they were like young Narad, right? Before Narendra became Swami Vivekananda, he was a total skeptic, and yet he felt drawn to. When he first met Sri Ramakrishna, he thought he was a madman, but he felt drawn to come back again and again. Did those experiences create that kind of personality transformation that made the life of that person and the lives of the people around them better, happier, deeper, more meaningful? Then I would say, then what difference does it make if it was a hallucination, right? It is a very happy hallucination then, if that's the case. We have to, and the great masters in all the traditions have said you have to test the things that you receive in, and this is why I was saying siddhis are such a dangerous thing. Sometimes we might feel we're receiving a vision or guidance, but if that guidance leads in a bad direction, it's probably just the ego speaking. It probably is a hallucination. But if it guides you in the right way, then I think it's okay to give ourselves permission to say that was the voice of God in that case.
I have a suggestion, Maharaj. Let's continue a little bit longer, maybe to 12:30, and maybe we'll just eliminate that bhajan session because we have this singing afterwards. Is that okay?
So this question says, meditation is being portrayed. I don't know, did I give this impression? Meditation is being portrayed as a means to an end. Of course, I said that. It is also seen as a tamasic exercise. This, of course, I don't think I ever conveyed this idea. I'll be disappointed if I've done it. Anyway, so, but we need to answer this. It is also seen as a tamasic exercise. Maybe you heard from him that the person who did Shavasana and slept,
Yes.
in that case it is
That
a
was a
tamasic.
tamasic exercise.
Yeah.
And disrupted everyone else's meditation.
Yes, yes. So, anyway, but to do meditation, we need to transform ourselves. Second part is okay. How do we do this in a tamasic world? So, at least whoever asked this question has agreed that the world is tamasic and we have to pull ourselves out of this tamasic world. So, from an intellectual level, it is not challenging, but the practical part is okay. From intellectual level, it's fine. All these wonderful ideas that we heard, very easy to intellectually appreciate and understand. But on a practical side, that is where tamas comes in. Because we are tamasic, that's why every one of us says, can we not repeat the mantra loudly? Because the grosser it is, it's more easier. We can grasp it. It appears to be tangible. Whereas if the subtle things are difficult, but because they are difficult because that is the moral of that story. The silken thread is difficult, but it was essential. Without that silken thread, the rope would not have gone there. So, to remove tamas, we need a little bit of rajas, as Swamiji says. We can't just jump to sattva. Sattvic nature is so rare. So, we are a mixture of these three gunas. You know what it stands for, tamas, rajas and sattva. So, Swamiji believed a logical path would be to first be rajasic a little bit. Once you do exhaust yourself by being rajasic, then sattva we can't jump from tamas to sattva directly. So, this is a slow process. It's not just intellectually easy to understand. Practically it is difficult. Even intellectually it is difficult to understand. But practically it is more so because you need to put in a lot of effort. It involves thinking, it involves gathering all your feelings, the love that you have, the emotions, and focusing them in a particular direction. And then comes the willpower. So, the will is very important. In all our sadhana, all the disciplines are to train the will and channelize it in useful channels. Make it pass through useful channels. That is the whole idea behind our ritualistic worship or karma yoga. In general, karma yoga, the moment you do action, you exercise your will. They don't remain ideas which remain frozen in your brain, and you are under the impression that you are sattvic. That's why we don't make progress. That is why Swamiji used to insist. When we saw people just sitting quietly, he said, it's better you go and do some gardening and exercise, do some rajasic work, do some seva, do some activity. Convert that tamas into rajas, and from that rajasic point of view, when the mind becomes restless, because that is the nature of rajas, it will make you restless. Then you have to decide at what point of time you have to slowly convert that into sattva. Activity is very good. As somebody was saying, you said that. Idle brain is the devil's workshop. But definitely, if it is tamasic, it will think all sorts of things. So it's better you do some creative work, some positive work, and engage yourself. So that is a second stage. And then from there, at a certain point of time, you see this, even rajas becomes responsible for all the restlessness in our mind. If work is not done properly as karma yoga, then you will find this is giving rise to a lot of restlessness. When I sit for meditation, you find all these thoughts of the activities that I have done rushing and disturbing our meditation. It's not allowing the mind and the personality to become sattvic. So that transition requires a slow shifting from rajas to tamas, requires some kind of spiritual practices. And that is what we discussed, the Kathopanishad. We have to go inward slowly, change the direction of all our actions and make that rajas act inward. As you go, you will find wonderful sattvic qualities developing in you. All the disciplines, yama, niyama, they are not just disciplines, they are disciplines which change through your willpower. You do these actions through karma yoga. Chitta Shuddhi means that. Shankaracharya says all this karma is Chitta Shuddhi. He was right in that sense. That karma yoga enables you to reduce the restlessness, converting the tamas to rajas and rajas to sattva. That's the idea. So it is difficult, but that is the only way.
I think this is a very householderish question, so I will take this one. How to overcome the fear of losing your spouse by death and becoming lonely? And I have to say, I face this fear all the time. And there's a Japanese expression that my wife and I use frequently, and it's I'll give you the literal translation, but as always with translations, the translation doesn't quite do it justice because it conveys a great deal of care and concern for the other person. Literally, it just means please be careful. We say gochui kudasai, and we say this whenever we're parting company. Like if I drop her off for work or I'm going to leave to go to a conference or something like that, we say gochui kudasai, and because please be careful, because we really don't want to lose the other person. But for me, I've had the experience, I'm sure many of us I had from an early age, of losing people I cared about, people who died who were near to me, my father when I was very young, then later my grandparents, pets, various people that have been dear to me. And what has always been helpful to me, one of the things that drew me to Vedanta was Bhagavan Sri Krishna's teaching in the Bhagavad Gita that we don't really lose anybody, that what you love in the other person is the self, is infinite, and that is reborn, right? We change bodies like changing clothes. And remembering that, reminding ourselves of that the other person, they've changed form, but they are in some very profound sense still with us, and we may even yet meet again, even in a very concrete sense, reassociate in another lifetime. The person who passes on is never really gone because the soul continues, the jiva continues on its journey. And there's another favorite dialogue of mine from the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad when Yajnavalkya is going off to be a renouncer. And he has two wives, and one of them, he makes sure that they're provided for before he leaves to be a sannyasi. And one of the wives is very wise, and she says, you've given me your material belongings, but I want your wisdom. And there's a long litany. He says to her, the husband is dear not for his own sake, but because of the Atman within. The wife is dear not for her own sake, but because of the Atman within. The children are dear not for their own sake, but because of the Atman within. And he goes, as the Upanishads are very fond of lists, he goes through like everything in the world. And all of this is dear to us because it's all a manifestation of that infinite reality. And I think the constant reminding oneself of that remembrance is something that really can help us get through those experiences of loss.
To answer this briefly, is asking about Shravana, Manana and Nididhyasana, and it has been worded like, how do we meditate on an Upanishadic verse? Is it think of the words, contemplate on the meaning of the words, and then let that deepen into meditation. So yes, that is the right way. Shravana, Manana, Nididhyasana. First we have to hear and try to determine the exact meaning of what each word means and how contextually it is applied in that particular sentence. So for that you might need a commentary. Very often Swami Turiyananji and all, when they went, they used to take one verse and sometimes meditate for 7 days till the real meaning was revealed. So that some of the direct disciples used to do that. Turiyananji especially used to say that for days and days together I used to contemplate. So contemplating on the meaning, sometimes every time you repeat that verse or you think of that verse, you will find a new meaning depending on your spiritual progress. That's why I said just thinking doesn't help. one has to do upasana. So meditation or nididhyasana, which is something similar to upasana. So nididhyasana is the last. And that deepening or that delving deep into the real meaning, the true spiritual import of that verse is the final stage. And obviously, when you do it for a sufficiently long period of time, and when it becomes a habit, as I said, everything is habit. Whether you do japa, whether you do all the habits, ultimately have a purifying power around them. It has a purifying power. Whether you japa, whether you recite hymns, whether you do karma yoga, when you do it repeatedly, it gathers power. Our bad habits have created what we are today. Repeated bad habits. Once in a while, if we have cultivated done something wrong, it doesn't become a habit. Over a period of time, these have become samskaras, deeply rooted in our consciousness. So, to root them out, you have to do nididhyasana more and more, depending on how much of purification your mind needs. So, that is the correct way. Shravana, Manana, Nididhyasana. So, I think it's 12:30.
Thank you, Maharaj.
So now we can all go for lunch. We're actually back on schedule. We have lunch scheduled for 12:30 to 1:30. So you don't get out of your singing. Yeah. So that'll be the next, and then, but it's only 45 minutes. So the conclusion, we have to meet back here at 2:15. Okay? So now we'll break for lunch. And another wonderful morning session. So thanks to both, and Jeff and Maharaj. What did I say? Devotional songs. 1:30 for devotional songs. But for the final session, come for the songs if you like. I'm not going to come. But the final session will be 2:15. But everybody please come for the singing.